Precision of a man who had learned long ago not to attract attention. His gait was steady, his eyes observant but not curious, his hands tucked into his jacket pockets as if shielding himself from the hum of travelers rushing past. The air smelled of burnt coffee, jet fuel, and stress. Families clustered in noisy groups, businessmen barked into phones, and children clutched stuffed animals like lifelines. Marcus blended into the background, a shadow among thousands. And that was exactly how he liked it. Life had taught him the value of invisibility. Once years ago he had stood out, and paid dearly for it. Wrong place, wrong time, wrong assumptions. Even now, though cleared of charges, the stain of suspicion lingered like a shadow he could never quite outrun. So he moved carefully, deliberately, never calling attention to himself. But fate has a cruel sense of humor. He noticed her near gate 23, a woman struggling with a rolling suitcase that seemed determined to topple over at every step. She wasn't frail, but there was something about the way she tugged and wrestled with the bag that made her look smaller than she was. Her hair, a sleek auburn that caught the artificial light, fell across her face as she bent to readjust the handle. People passed her without a glance, too consumed by their own departures and arrivals. Marcus hesitated. Helping meant stepping out of the background. But his mother's voice echoed in his mind. Kindness costs nothing, Marcus. He sighed, then crossed the space between them. Excuse me, he said, his voice deep but gentle. Looks like your bag's fighting back. The woman straightened quickly, startled, her sharp green eyes locking onto his. For a moment, Marcus felt as if he had stepped in front of a moving train. There was something piercing in her gaze, assessing, measuring, as though she wasn't just looking at him, but through him. Then she smiled, a quick, professional smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Yeah, it's got a mind of its own, she said. Here, Marcus offered, reaching for the handle. Mind if I? She hesitated, her fingers tightening on the suitcase for half a second too long, before releasing it. Marcus tilted the bag back, adjusted the crooked wheels, and steadied it with practiced ease. There, he said, handing it back. Should roll smoother now. Her smile deepened, a touch more genuine this time. Thank you. Not many people would stop. Marcus shrugged, uncomfortable under the weight of her attention. Guess I'm not most people. She nodded, her eyes lingering on him a little too long before she looked away. Well, I appreciate it. She extended a hand. Rebecca. He hesitated again. A stranger giving her name, it felt oddly deliberate. Still, he took her hand. Marcus. Her grip was firm, controlled. The kind of handshake that told him she was used to authority, used to commanding respect. Something about her presence felt official. But Marcus pushed the thought aside. She was just a traveler, like him. Nothing more. The boarding announcement for her flight crackled over the loudspeaker. She glanced at the gate, then back at him. That's me. Thanks again. No problem, he said, stepping back into the current of travelers. Rebecca wheeled her suitcase away, but not before casting one final glance over her shoulder. Marcus didn't notice. His attention was already elsewhere, on his phone buzzing in his pocket. But if he had seen her eyes, sharp and calculating as they swept over him one last time, he might have realized that this encounter was no accident. For Rebecca Kane wasn't just another passenger rushing to make a flight. She was an FBI agent. And Marcus Johnson had been her target for months. Marcus had always thought of airports as liminal spaces, places where people slipped between worlds, their real selves suspended somewhere between baggage claims and boarding gates. For him, though, the airport was more than a passageway. It was a stage where he played a role. The quiet man, the careful traveler, the one no one remembered. But the encounter with Rebecca lingered longer than it should have. He couldn't shake the memory of her handshake, the intensity of her eyes. He told himself it was nothing, just a stranger's politeness, but something about her presence felt heavier, like a thread tugging at a part of him he didn't want unraveled. He pushed the thought aside. He had his own reasons for being here, reasons that required discipline, secrecy, and above all, silence. He carried no more than a small duffel bag, deliberately unremarkable. His ticket was paid in cash. His phone, a burner. Marcus lived like a man waiting for the other shoe to drop, because in his world, it always did. As he crossed through the arrivals hall, a wave of noise greeted him. Announcements barked overhead, the squeal of luggage wheels echoed across polished floors, and the nervous chatter of travelers buzzed around him. Marcus slowed, scanning the crowd instinctively. Old habits. He had learned a long time ago to read faces, to notice who was watching and who was trying not to. He told himself he was being paranoid. And yet, she was there. Rebecca. Standing by a coffee kiosk, her auburn hair tied back now, her posture straighter, firmer. She wasn't fumbling with her suitcase anymore. She wasn't struggling to fit in. No, she looked like she belonged. Like she was waiting. Marcus felt a twist in his gut. Coincidence? It had to be. People caught the same flights all the time. Travelers bumped into each other. It was nothing unusual. And yet, when her gaze flicked up and landed squarely on him, as if she'd been expecting him, the idea of coincidence dissolved. He didn't slow. He didn't change direction. He simply walked past her, eyes forward, face calm. But inside, alarms blared. Rebecca, meanwhile, kept her movements casual. She lifted her coffee cup, pretended to sip, then slid her phone out of her pocket. The screen lit up briefly as her thumb brushed across it. To anyone else, she was another traveler checking her messages. But Marcus wasn't anyone else. He noticed the discreet way she tilted the phone, the faint murmur of her lips as she spoke quietly into a hidden mic. He didn't hear the words, but he didn't need to. He'd seen this before. In another life, in another city, when eyes were on him and hands waited for him to slip. The crowd thickened as a new wave of arrivals flooded the hall. Marcus moved with them, merging into the stream, his mind racing. If she was what he suspected, if she was law enforcement, it meant his precautions hadn't been enough. But why him? Why now? He'd done everything right, kept his head down, avoided the mistakes of his past. He had built his life carefully, like stacking fragile glass. One push and it could all collapse. Rebecca trailed him at a distance, careful not to close in too quickly. Her demeanor was professional, but beneath it lay tension. She had studied Marcus for months. His routines, his habits, his silences. And yet, seeing him here, helping her with something as simple as a suitcase, had unsettled her in a way she hadn't expected. He hadn't looked like the man her file painted, the one marked with suspicion, the one whose past whispered of unsolved crimes and unanswered questions. Still, she reminded herself, appearances deceived. That was her job, to look past them. Marcus, weaving through the terminal, debated his next move. Run. No. Running only drew attention. Hide. Impossible in a place designed to funnel people into visibility. That left only one option. Endure. Pretend. Stay calm until he figured out who she really was, and why she had fixed those unrelenting eyes on him. By the time he reached the taxi stand outside, the evening had painted the city skyline in shades of gold and shadow. He slid into the back seat of a cab, his pulse finally slowing. As the car pulled away, Marcus glanced in the mirror. Rebecca was there, stepping out into the same fading light. Her coffee cup was gone, replaced by a phone held loosely at her side. She wasn't even trying to hide anymore. Marcus leaned back, exhaling sharply. He knew then. He wasn't imagining it. He was being followed. The outsider had arrived. And she wasn't leaving any time soon. The cab rattled through the city's arteries, neon lights blurring past as Marcus sank deeper into the seat. He stared at the driver's license card clipped to the dashboard, pretending to read the name while his mind raced. Rebecca's face lingered like a phantom in his thoughts. She wasn't just following. She was watching. Studying. He told himself not to panic. Panic made mistakes. Mistakes got you caught. Or worse. The city outside hummed with life, oblivious to the silent war of eyes and shadows unfolding. Marcus paid the driver in cash and slipped out near a stretch of old apartment blocks. The place was ordinary, even shabby, exactly the kind of cover he needed. He moved quickly, taking back alleys, his senses sharpened. But the feeling of being trailed never left him. Every echo of footsteps, every shadow that stretched longer than it should, pressed against his nerves. He ducked into the entrance of his building, climbed the stairs 2 at a time, and slid into his apartment with a controlled breath. The room welcomed him with silence. Just the hum of the fridge, the faint creak of pipes. But silence wasn't always safe. He closed the blinds, checked the locks twice, then reached under the couch cushion. His fingers brushed against cold metal, a pistol, unregistered, his insurance policy. He didn't want to use it. But he knew better than to live without it. That night, as darkness pressed against the windows, Marcus tried to sleep. He couldn't. Every creak of the building felt amplified. Every murmur of the wind through the alley sounded like voices. He lay awake, eyes on the ceiling, thoughts circling Rebecca. Who was she? What did she know? Then, soft, barely audible, a sound that didn't belong. A floorboard groaning. Marcus was up in an instant, gun in hand, heart pounding against his ribs like a war drum. He moved silently, each step measured. The apartment was small, kitchen, living room, a single bedroom, yet every corner felt like it hid a threat. He froze. Listened. There it was again, a whisper of movement. He spun toward the window, but the blinds were drawn tight. Still, the faintest shift of shadow flickered beneath them, as if someone stood just beyond, listening, watching. Marcus crept closer, finger tightening on the trigger. He yanked the blinds open. Nothing. Just the street below, empty under the glow of a flickering lamp. But when he turned, a voice brushed against his ear, low, almost ghost-like. You can't run forever. Marcus whipped around, gun raised. Empty room. Empty air. The whisper dissolved into silence. His chest heaved. Was he losing it? No. No, it was too clear, too close. Someone had been there. He could feel it like a chill crawling under his skin. He spent the next hour checking every inch of the apartment. Closet. Bathroom. Even the crawl space above the ceiling panel. Empty. Still, the voice lingered, echoing inside his skull. When his phone buzzed, he nearly pulled the trigger out of reflex. Unknown number. One message. We're watching. Marcus's hands trembled despite his efforts to steady them. He deleted the message instantly, but the words burned behind his eyes. Watching. Who was we? Was Rebecca working alone, or was she part of something larger? Across town, Rebecca sat in a dim hotel room, files spread across the bed, her phone pressed to her ear. Her voice was quiet, precise. Yes. I saw him. He made contact. But he's cautious, paranoid. He'll make a mistake if we keep the pressure on. A pause, as the voice on the other end gave instructions. Rebecca's jaw tightened. I understand. No direct confrontation yet. Let him feel the walls closing in. She hung up and leaned back against the headboard, staring at the ceiling. Despite her training, despite her certainty about her mission, something unsettled her. The way Marcus had looked at her, like a man who had already been hunted for too long. Like someone who didn't just expect betrayal, but lived inside it. As the night deepened, the city seemed to grow quieter, darker. And in 2 separate rooms, one cluttered and lonely, the other sterile and controlled, 2 people lay awake, listening to whispers in the dark. One heard the echo of paranoia. The other heard the call of duty. And neither knew which voice would prove more dangerous. Morning came, but it didn't feel like it. The sunlight that bled through Marcus's blinds only sharpened the edges of his unease. He sat at the kitchen table, a chipped mug of coffee untouched before him, eyes scanning the street below through a slit in the curtain. Every passerby looked suspicious, every car idling too long hummed of surveillance. Paranoia wasn't new to Marcus. It had been stitched into him since childhood, since watching neighbors vanish after late-night knocks, since learning how quickly trust turned into betrayal. But this was different. This wasn't paranoia. This was precision. Rebecca had eyes on him, and he could feel it. He tried to shake it off, focusing instead on the tasks of survival. A burner phone here, cash stashed there. He deleted old contacts, wiped hard drives, made sure his trails were as faint as cigarette smoke in the wind. Still, he knew it wasn't enough. When the government wanted you, they didn't follow footprints, they followed your shadow. At noon, he stepped out for groceries, though it was more recon than shopping. He wore a cap low over his brow, shoulders loose but alert. The market buzzed with noise, but Marcus's ears sifted for patterns. The scrape of a shoe too steady, the cough that came too often, the woman lingering too long by the fruit stand. Then he saw her. Rebecca. Across the street, blending into the flow of pedestrians. Not approaching, not hiding either. Just there, a constant. She glanced at her phone, then back at him, like a fisherman tugging the line to remind the catch that escape was pointless. Marcus forced himself not to react. He bought what he needed, left calmly, but his heart hammered. By the time he reached his apartment, sweat clung to his shirt despite the chill. Inside, he dropped the bag on the counter, ripped open one of the apples he'd bought, and chewed mechanically. He wasn't hungry. He needed clarity. That night, his phone buzzed again. Same unknown number. This time, a photo. Him. Leaving the market. Rebecca in the background, just out of focus. No caption. Just proof. Marcus exhaled slowly, trying to steady his shaking hands. They weren't just watching, they wanted him to know. Pressure. Intimidation. Classic tactics. He couldn't let them win. He powered down the phone, pried the back open, and smashed the SIM card under his boot heel. Then he went to his desk, pulled out a worn notebook. Not for journaling, for maps, codes, fragments of plans. He started drawing lines, writing names, tracing connections that only he seemed to remember. But Rebecca wasn't idle either. From a surveillance van parked 3 blocks away, she watched feeds flicker across monitors. Cameras had been placed with surgical accuracy. One facing Marcus's building, another in the alley, a third at the corner store. Every move he made was logged, every visitor noted. "Subject is aware," she said into her earpiece, voice crisp. "He's showing classic counter-surveillance behavior. But he's slipping, he's agitated." Her handler's voice crackled back. "Good. Push harder. People under pressure reveal their truth." Rebecca's lips pressed into a line. She was good at this. Too good. She could dismantle a life piece by piece without ever laying a hand on it. But something about Marcus unsettled her. The loneliness in his apartment, the way he carried his caution like armor. It didn't fit the profile of the criminal they painted him to be. Yet orders were orders. By midnight, Marcus sat in darkness, gun resting on the table, listening. He could feel them tightening the net, pulling the strands closer. Each breath he took seemed louder than it should be, each thought heavier. He whispered to himself, a vow into the silence. "They won't break me." But deep down, he wondered, was he already broken? Marcus sat in his apartment, lights dim, curtains drawn, the television flickering with muted images that he didn't watch. Days bled together, each one a little tighter, each night a little darker. The net Rebecca had woven around him wasn't just surveillance anymore. It was suffocation. Everywhere he turned, there she was, or someone like her. At the laundromat, a man reading a newspaper with too much interest in the door. At the diner, a woman stirring coffee long after it had gone cold. At the bus stop, a teenager scrolling endlessly on a phone, never once glancing at the screen. They weren't amateurs. They were trained. And they wanted him to know. At first, Marcus tried to outmaneuver them, switching routes, doubling back, slipping through alleys. But no matter what he did, Rebecca's presence lingered, ghost-like. They weren't trying to catch him yet. They were trying to break him. And it was working. By the fourth day, Marcus found himself snapping at the smallest sounds: the creak of pipes, the rattle of the elevator, footsteps in the hall. His reflection in the mirror startled him. Hollow eyes, jaw clenched, hands trembling slightly from the weight of constant vigilance. That night, his resolve fractured. It started with the phone. A new one. He thought it was clean. He'd bought it from a pawn shop 2 neighborhoods over, paid cash, activated it with a number he hadn't used before. But as he powered it on, a text appeared almost instantly. "You can't hide." No number, no contact. Just the words. Marcus hurled the phone across the room. It shattered against the wall, pieces scattering like shrapnel. His chest heaved, a mix of rage and panic boiling together. For the first time in years, he felt powerless. And he hated it. He stormed out of the apartment, hoodie pulled up, fists clenched. The streets were quiet, slick from recent rain, the glow of street lamps casting long, distorted shadows. He walked fast, no destination, just away from the cage they'd built around him. But cages travel. Halfway down the block, he felt it, eyes on his back. He spun. And there she was. Rebecca. Standing across the street, hands in her coat pockets, expression unreadable. "Enough." Marcus's voice cracked the night, raw and desperate. "Why are you following me?" Rebecca didn't flinch. She didn't even look surprised. "You know why," she said calmly. "No," Marcus snapped, stepping closer, his voice trembling with both anger and exhaustion. "I don't. You've been breathing down my neck, crawling through my life. What the hell do you want from me?" Rebecca's gaze softened, just barely. "The truth." Marcus laughed bitterly, the sound more like a growl. "The truth. You don't want the truth. You want a story that fits whatever file you've got on me." Silence stretched between them, heavy as concrete. Cars passed occasionally, their headlights washing over the confrontation before fading into the distance. Rebecca finally spoke, voice low. "We're not the enemy, Marcus. But you're not making this easy." Her choice of words, "we," made his stomach twist. This wasn't just her. It was bigger, wider, deeper. "Then make it easy," Marcus said, voice cracking. "Tell me what you think I did." Rebecca's jaw tightened. She wanted to. He could see it in her eyes. But protocol chained her tongue. "You know what you did," she said finally, and the words cut sharper than any accusation. Marcus staggered back, shaking his head. "I'm done with this." He turned, fists still clenched, and stormed off into the night. Rebecca didn't follow. Not right away. She stood where she was, heart heavier than she'd expected. She'd been trained to detach, to treat surveillance as a job, not a moral question. But something about Marcus, the loneliness, the way he carried his pain, gnawed at her. Still, she lifted her phone and murmured into the mic. "Subject is agitated. We're close to the breaking point." Back in his apartment, Marcus collapsed onto the couch, head in his hands. His breath came ragged, chest burning from both the confrontation and the fear that nothing he said or did would matter. But somewhere deep inside, beneath the exhaustion and anger, a spark remained. If they wanted a breaking point, fine. But Marcus wouldn't shatter quietly. He'd fight back. The night had a way of making every sound sharper, every shadow deeper. Marcus prowled the streets, hood pulled low over his face, fists loose but ready. He wasn't running anymore. He was hunting. Not for anyone in particular. Just for the truth, for control, for a way to untangle the web tightening around him. It started small. Surveillance cameras disabled one by one, streetlights memorized, escape routes plotted. Marcus had lived his life in the margins, always anticipating betrayal, and now he used every skill he had honed through years of caution. He became a ghost. Rebecca watched from a distance, the city lights reflecting in her eyes. She'd expected Marcus to crack under the pressure, to fall neatly into the lines her team had drawn. But he didn't. He adapted. He resisted. and every calculated move he made chipped away at her certainty. Her phone buzzed with updates from the van stationed several blocks away. She ignored them, keeping her gaze on him. There was a rhythm to his movement, a pattern she could study, but it wasn't criminal. It was survival. She stepped into the alley behind him, keeping shadows between them. Every instinct screamed to confront, to assert control. But she hesitated. Marcus was no ordinary suspect. He wasn't just another file number or a name on a screen. He was real, and his reality didn't fit the neat narrative she'd been assigned. Marcus ducked into a deserted parking garage, spinning around to check his tail. He caught a glimpse of her in the reflection of a darkened window. Slender, poised, deliberate. She froze, eyes locking with his for a heartbeat that stretched into an eternity. "You're persistent," he said, voice low but firm. "I'll give you that." Rebecca didn't respond, didn't move closer. But he saw the tension in her posture, the conflict behind the professional mask. She wasn't just watching, she was calculating, measuring risk, assessing intent, questioning orders. "You should know," Marcus said, stepping closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I don't break easy. And I don't trust easily. You've been playing with fire, standing in my life like this. And fire," his fingers flexed, tapping his side, "can burn." Rebecca's jaw tightened. The words were a warning, not a threat, but they resonated. She'd trained for years to read behavior, to detect deception. And he wasn't deceiving her. Every fiber of him screamed honesty, honesty wrapped in survival instincts sharpened to perfection. For the first time, Rebecca considered crossing a line. Orders dictated observation, following, gathering intel. But she could see it. Marcus wasn't what they thought. Following protocol meant keeping him under scrutiny, but at what cost? Before she could act, a noise erupted, metal scraping against concrete. Marcus spun instinctively, fists up. Two men stepped from the shadows, faces obscured, weapons drawn. He'd anticipated this. Not them specifically, but the possibility. Years of caution and awareness had prepared him for exactly this. Rebecca reacted instinctively, too. She stepped into the open, badge in hand, voice sharp and commanding. "Freeze." The men faltered, caught between Marcus and the sudden authority of the agent. In that moment, lines blurred. Marcus, the pursued, and Rebecca, the pursuer, now faced a mutual threat. The dynamic shifted. She wasn't just watching anymore. She was involved. Marcus' heart raced. Survival instincts overrode pride. He nodded once to Rebecca, a silent truce, and together, they confronted the danger. Every motion counted, every decision instantaneous. The men realized too late that their target was not alone. When the last shadow fell silent, Marcus and Rebecca stood in the dim garage, breaths heaving. For a moment, the world seemed suspended, danger evaporated, leaving only the tension between them. Marcus's eyes met hers, and for the first time, neither was suspect nor agent. Both were survivors navigating a battlefield where lines had already been crossed. Rebecca lowered her badge slightly, voice quieter, almost reluctant. "You're stronger than I expected." Marcus let out a bitter laugh, wiping sweat from his brow. "You don't even know the half of it." And in the shadows of the garage, both of them understood. The game had changed. Rules no longer applied. Boundaries were gone. And whatever came next, neither of them would be the same. The night air smelled of rain and asphalt as Marcus and Rebecca stepped out of the abandoned garage, each alert to the faintest movement, every shadow a potential threat. Neither spoke at first. Words were unnecessary. Survival had replaced protocol and suspicion. They were two strangers, temporarily bound by circumstance. Marcus glanced at Rebecca, noting the tension in her shoulders, the careful way she scanned the streets. She had authority, yes, but in this moment, that authority was irrelevant. She was human. And, strangely, he trusted her more than he had anyone in years. "So," Marcus said finally, voice low, "what now?" Rebecca's gaze flicked to him, her professional mask back in place but frayed at the edges. Now, she said, we make sure they don't follow you again. And we figure out who's really behind this. Marcus raised an eyebrow. We? Yes, she said, firm. You and me. For now, we're a team. A bitter laugh escaped him. Funny. I help someone at the airport, and suddenly I'm in an FBI buddy movie. Rebecca didn't smile. This isn't a joke. You've been set up, Marcus. And if we don't act carefully, you're finished. He studied her, skepticism etched across his features. Set up? By who? She shook her head. That's what we need to find out. But first, you need to trust me. Marcus considered it. Trust didn't come easily, not with strangers, not with anyone who had the power to make your life disappear with a phone call. But he had no choice. He nodded once, curtly. Fine. Temporary truce. They moved through the city like shadows, slipping into alleys and side streets. Rebecca shared pieces of information she could, nothing classified, but enough to confirm that Marcus was in serious danger. There were whispers of corruption, syndicate ties, agents on payrolls that couldn't be trusted. And worst of all, whoever had framed him had planned it carefully. Marcus absorbed it, his mind racing. Years of cautious living had taught him to analyze, anticipate, and adapt. Now, with Rebecca at his side, they had eyes and insight he didn't have alone. As they paused in a dimly lit parking lot, Marcus turned to her. Why me? Why not just follow protocol and throw me in a cell until this blows over? Rebecca's jaw tightened. Because I don't work that way. I follow evidence. And right now, the evidence doesn't point to you being the criminal. It points to someone clever enough to use you as a pawn. Marcus exhaled slowly, tension easing slightly. Then let's find them. The partnership was uneasy but practical. Marcus knew the streets. Rebecca had resources. Together, they could anticipate moves, plan escapes, and maybe turn the tables. As they prepared to move again, a sound broke the quiet, a low engine, tires crunching over gravel. Both froze. A black SUV rounded the corner, headlights cutting through the mist. Men in suits stepped out, weapons visible. Rebecca grabbed Marcus's arm. Move. They sprinted toward the shadows, ducking into a narrow alleyway. Marcus's heart pounded, but adrenaline sharpened his senses. The men weren't going to give up. They were professionals, and they expected him alone. Now, with Rebecca, the balance had shifted. They reached an abandoned building and slipped inside, closing the rusted door behind them. Breathing heavily, Marcus leaned against the wall. You know, he said, I never thought I'd be glad to see an FBI agent. Rebecca didn't answer immediately. She scanned the street through a broken window. Then, slowly, she allowed herself a faint nod. We need to be smart. They'll come back. But together, we have a chance. Marcus studied her. The professional mask was back, but he caught a glimpse of something else. Determination, maybe even respect. For the first time in years, Marcus didn't feel entirely alone. The alliance was fragile, temporary, uneasy. But in the shadow of imminent danger, it was the only thing standing between survival and annihilation. And both of them knew, from this point forward, there was no turning back. The abandoned building smelled of dust, rust, and decay, but it offered a temporary refuge. Marcus and Rebecca crouched in the corner, their breaths synchronized to the rhythm of the distant city, ears straining for the faintest hint of pursuit. Outside, the night was alive with shadows, each one a potential threat. Tell me everything you know, Marcus said finally, voice low. His hands were still trembling from the adrenaline, but his mind had already shifted into planning mode. Survival was never about luck. It was about foresight. Rebecca nodded, pulling out a small, worn notebook from her jacket. You've been framed, she began. Not just by the syndicate, but by someone inside the bureau. Someone with influence, who wants you out of the way. You fit their narrative perfectly. A black man, living quietly, minimal ties. They assumed you'd disappear into the chaos they created. Marcus's jaw tightened. Someone in the FBI? Rebecca's eyes were steady. Yes. And they've been orchestrating this from the shadows, using the syndicate as a tool. They expected me to follow protocol, trap you, and close the case. But I couldn't. I watched you. And now I know the truth. We need to expose them. The weight of it pressed down on Marcus. His life, every careful decision, every precaution, had been manipulated by forces he hadn't even known existed. Yet Rebecca's presence was grounding, a tether to reality amidst the spiraling chaos. We can't go to the bureau, she continued. They'll bury the evidence, spin the story, make it look like you were guilty all along. We do this ourselves, quietly, carefully. We find the person controlling both sides and bring them down. Marcus studied her, measuring every word, every micro-expression. She was telling the truth, or as close to it as he could hope for. He nodded slowly. Then let's start pulling the threads. Hours passed in meticulous planning. Rebecca laid out what she knew about the syndicate's movements, their safe houses, and financial networks. Marcus provided insight into patterns the surveillance overlooked, back routes, escape points, locations where they could hide and observe. Each piece of information connected like a spider's web. And as the lines formed, the enormity of the conspiracy became clear. It wasn't just about him. It was about power, control, and the willingness of those in authority to manipulate and destroy lives for personal gain. Marcus clenched his fists. They underestimated me, he muttered. And they underestimated you too. Rebecca's lips twitched into a ghost of a smile. Underestimation can be dangerous. For them, it will be deadly. Their strategy was simple, yet perilous. They would lure the syndicate into making a move, expose the corrupt bureau agents, and gather irrefutable evidence. Each step carried risk. One wrong move and it would all collapse. Marcus could be arrested, or worse, killed. Rebecca risked her career, perhaps her life. As dawn crept over the skyline, Marcus stared out the cracked window at the city below. He thought of his old life. Quiet, hidden, careful. That life was gone. The web had been spun, the trap laid, and he was in the center. But for the first time in years, he felt a spark of hope. Not blind hope, but calculated, dangerous hope. Rebecca joined him, her gaze meeting his. We move tonight, she said. The syndicate is making a shift, and the corrupt agents are getting anxious. They'll make mistakes. Marcus nodded. Then we catch them. All of them. There was a moment of silence, the kind that stretches across shared danger and mutual trust. In that stillness, an unspoken understanding formed. They were no longer pursuer and pursued, agent and target. They were allies. Partners. Soldiers in a war where the battlefield was hidden, and the enemy could be anyone, even someone wearing a badge. The city below began to stir, indifferent to the schemes playing out in shadowed corners and abandoned buildings. The web was vast, tangled, and deadly, but for the first time Marcus and Rebecca had begun to see the pattern. And when the first move was made, the consequences would ripple far beyond either of them. For now, though, they waited, poised, ready to strike. The game had changed. The web was unraveling, and neither of them would allow it to survive intact. Night had fallen like a velvet curtain over the city, swallowing streets and alleyways in darkness. Marcus and Rebecca moved like shadows, side by side, their footsteps silent against the wet asphalt. The abandoned warehouse ahead hummed with the faint noise of machinery and whispered conversations. Syndicate members preparing for a shipment, unaware their carefully orchestrated world was about to unravel. Marcus checked his gear one last time. His hands were steady, eyes sharp, heart hammering with anticipation. For months, he had been hunted, manipulated, and pushed to the edge. Tonight, it would end. Either they exposed the truth, or everything he'd fought for would be destroyed. Rebecca leaned close, whispering, "Remember, stay calm. Follow my lead. We take them by surprise. He nodded, the briefest flicker of a smile crossing his face. After all this, I'm not scared anymore. The warehouse loomed ahead, dark and foreboding. They slipped inside through a side entrance, moving with precision, blending with the shadows. Inside, the syndicate was in chaos, guards milling about, men counting cash and boxes, unaware that Marcus and Rebecca were already among them. Rebecca signaled silently, and Marcus moved toward the central office where their target, the corrupt agent orchestrating the framing, was stationed. The tension was electric, a wire stretched tight across the room. One wrong move, one misstep, and it would all collapse. They rounded a corner and froze. Two armed men blocked the hallway. Marcus's mind raced. Time for stealth had ended. With a swift, practiced motion, he disarmed the first man, using his momentum to push him into the wall. Rebecca was already behind the second, gun drawn, voice commanding. "Drop it." The men hesitated. The surprise and skill of their attackers had unbalanced them. Within moments, Marcus and Rebecca had control, binding them with zip ties and moving on. Inside the central office, the corrupt agent sat behind a desk, face pale as he recognized them. "Kane. Johnson. What is this?" Marcus stepped forward, voice calm but icy. "The end of your manipulation. The lies, the setup, it stops tonight." Rebecca moved to secure the room, gathering evidence. Files, USB drives, documents linking the agent to the syndicate and the crimes against Marcus. Every piece of proof was precise, indisputable. The agent's hands shook. "You don't understand. This is bigger than you. I have connections, people in the bureau, in the city. If you expose me..." Marcus cut him off. "We already know. And now so will everyone else." The tension broke as Marcus pulled the phone out of his pocket, recording the confession. Rebecca backed him, gun trained on the man, her presence a reminder that escape was impossible. Outside, sirens began to wail. Rebecca had tipped off trustworthy colleagues in advance. Backup was on the way. The corrupt agent's web of deceit was collapsing, strand by strand. Marcus felt a strange sense of release, the weight of months of fear lifting. Every night of paranoia, every step of careful avoidance, had led to this moment. He had been hunted, yes, but now the hunters had become the hunted. Rebecca's gaze met his, and for the first time, there was no professional barrier, no mistrust. Only the shared understanding of survival and justice. "It's over," she said softly. Marcus nodded, chest heaving. "Not just for me. For everyone you tried to destroy." Minutes later, the authorities arrived, taking control, securing evidence, and arresting the remaining syndicate members. The corrupt agent went quietly, his arrogance finally replaced by fear. As Marcus stepped outside into the cool night air, he looked at the city skyline, the lights reflecting in puddles from earlier rain. Freedom, raw and unfiltered, felt surreal after weeks of being trapped by suspicion and manipulation. Rebecca joined him, her face weary but resolute. "You did it," she said. "No," Marcus replied. "We did it." A brief silence followed, filled only by the distant hum of traffic and the night wind. The danger was gone, the net dismantled, and for the first time, Marcus felt something he hadn't in a long time: relief, and the faintest glimmer of trust. Rebecca glanced at him, the faintest hint of a smile tugging at her lips. "Your life. It's yours again." Marcus nodded, looking back at the warehouse, the city, the nights he had survived. He had been pushed to the edge, tested, and hunted. But he had endured. And now life, real, unchained life, was waiting.